This book is written with a particular audience in mind. In a nutshell, centralized civilization's discontents. These will be mostly those who have had their appetite for industrial trinkets satiated, but find that they have another hunger. They will be those who have been at the center of centralization's waves. White, middle class, well-educated, liberal, like us. They have capital, and they will be the first to return to the land, leaving the poor, once enslaved to the land, now enslaved to the cities. This book will be usable by the individual family, the extended family, or the commune. Although of these types of groups, we believe that in homesteading there are great advantages, psychological and material, to be gained from a minimum of centralization to, say, a hamlet level, together with cooperative use of major tools and even land. Furthermore, it should be usable directly by the homesteader himself if he is interested enough in the design complexities entailed in his desired lifestyle, or by homestead engineers, for whom the homestead builders will be clientele. It is obvious, however, that homestead engineering will never be a very profitable profession, not because of lack of clientele, but because of the amount of engineering attention that will be required for custom design of a single homestead. Nonetheless, it is our belief that these professionals will be forthcoming because of the rewards of the work other than profit. This book is written especially for one particular gentleman, Richard M. Nixon. No kind of leadership can prevent the changes that are coming, but wise leadership could help tremendously to smooth out bumps. The diffusing of our centralized bomb should have the priority that the moon landing once had, and all of our scientific muscle may not be up to the job. Nonetheless, research and education should be directed toward the transition from growth and centralization to equilibrium, and to what this book proposes as critical to equilibrium, a decentralized state of human activities. The success and smoothness of this transition is far more important to human future than the expansion into outer space of our cancerous growth. My cat's here. Finally, this book is compiled for use more by the original builder than by the remodeler. There is going to be a lot of remodeling required in the near future, as we find that much of our fixed capital becomes worthless, especially buildings unheatable. However, our main intent is to serve him who is willing and able to discard all architectural presuppositions. We would prefer, if possible, a new culture to an old one that must be bastardized. Nonetheless, much of the information included in this volume is applicable to remodeling, and the subject of remodeling perhaps one day will be discussed thoroughly in a supplement. The structure of this handbook is based on a sequence to be used in homestead design. We begin with the presentation of our mathematical model of flows and levels on a homestead. That's Wedge's paradigm. This may be one of the most extensive computer models constructed to date. We found it necessary, however, because a homestead, we found, is such a complex system of processes that no mental model, that is, no person's mental understanding of a homestead, could even hope to be complete, much less be able to follow changing inputs through it. If the reader doubts this, let him figure out by hand how many cubic feet of hay storage will be required to keep a family of 2 adults and 2 children supplied year-round with cheese, and then consider that our model can handle that and 100 problems like it in seconds. The model, however, is strictly a tool for data processing and need be used only in the design, not the maintenance of a homestead. As pointed out earlier, before the great disturbance of centralization, the evolutionary process had developed material cultures that carried all this information in a sort of cultural model, in addition to information regarding techniques and much more. A second generation on a computer-born homestead should already have picked up the cultural design rhythm again. The utilization of our model has required the gathering of thousands and thousands of quanta of information and its programming. This data divides itself into what we have called invariable data, or that data which is unlikely to be client-related, and variable data, or that data which will vary from client to client or location to location. An example of invariable data would be water consumption per unit weight of lactating cow biomass. An example of variable data would be the nature of the client's preferred diet. We have included in this book all of the invariable data used in the model and examples of analytic tests to determine the client data and site data, both of which we regard as controlling complexes to the whole system of the homestead. A sample run of the computer model will give us a prediction of how much, when, for all the materials that can flow on the homestead. That is, all the levels that can change. Supplied with this information, we can then go on to design the physical plant. The part of the handbook pertaining to the design process will begin with a complete discussion and evaluation of materials, followed by a discussion of design limitations imposed, for example, by the strengths of materials, building codes, available assets, etc. Next, we will offer what we consider to be the most rational design process available. We will first apply it to component spaces for the processes that must be linked. Those component designs may be able to be used invariably to a certain extent to reduce design costs. And secondly, to the spatial arrangement and subsequent design modifications of these components. Throughout the design process, several reruns of the model will be required to account for balancing payments after a construction cost estimate is arrived at, and to account for the construction schedule's effect on the efficiency of the whole system. These reruns will in turn affect design, and the whole process may have to be run through several times. Throughout the book, we will carry a consistent example of the design of a homestead. In a separate section, however, we will give the results of other examples. Finally, we will include a brief section in which we will abandon all pretext of objectivity and set forth as clearly as possible some of our values, which we personally will apply to our work in the profession of homestead engineering. Frank Antonsen, Orford, New Hampshire, November 2nd, 1973. Note to the reader, the following material, unlike the working introduction, is not in rough draft form. It is even more humble in form than that. Basically, what follows is excerpts from correspondence between Gary Fitz and Frank Antonsen during the years 1972 and 1973. The purpose of its reproduction here is merely to give the reader a rough idea of the type of work that has been done and is being done. The material follows the subject sequence of the working table of contents, as will be evident from the page numbering system. Comments that I add as I type will be evident from the absence of quotation marks. Many subjects mentioned in the working table of contents will not be covered here. Here the intention is to provide a sketch, not to be complete. I may also include many quotations from sources other than our correspondence, in which case the transitions from quote to quote may be very rough. This is because at this stage in the compilation of the handbook, it is not worth the trouble to smooth the information into very readable form. The sum of these working papers will amount to a staging, a few bricks, and very little mortar. Still, from them, I hope the reader will be able to envision the structure. Now, here I will stop, and I'm going to put this on my blog. I'm fairly sure. There's quite a bit here, but the rest of this would not be very readable. So, I have come to the end of the Decentralist Manifesto.